All right, so we have Frank, Glenn, and Michael Stershek.
Okay, so we do have a forum.
Yeah.
All right. Ready? All right, we're going to start the November Finance Committee meeting here at Lehigh Northampton Airport Authority. And I think this looks like it's going to be like a record-setting presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Todd.
I thought you want to do a meeting minutes first.
I guess I do. Yeah. Oh, wait, is there any public comment?
We do not have public
No
comment.
public comment. Approve the meeting minutes. That's the next step. So do I have a motion?
So
I'll
moved.
make the motion, Frank.
Mike and Glenn?
Moved and second. Moved and second.
All in favor? Say aye.
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 That's done. We're going to accept the financial statements from October that Todd sent out. I need motions for that.
We got to walk through them, Frank.
So moved.
Oh, let's just approve them.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Sorry, Todd, go ahead.
Frank's just ready to get out of here.
I'm waking up.
I'll just walk through these. This is kind of going to lead into our budget discussions, but traffic picked back up in October. As you remember, we had the closures in September, so we're getting pretty close, not quite there yet, but we're only 7% below October 2019. Next slide. Again, showing that things are improving. This is versus our August budget. Our August budget that we just amended in August, obviously. We had 229,000 versus 22,000 lost that we had budgeted, but that 22,000 included 350 of CARES that we did not draw on. So the total difference is approximately $600,000 positive variance that we have without CARES. Again, a reflection of us returning to close to pre-pandemic levels, but you can see aviation services is up. Thank you, Darren. And we've continued to manage our expenses. And a lot of that is because we're still struggling to hire some folks. And that budget amendment that we did in August really was kind of pushing us into the 2022 budget, and obviously we just haven't hired a lot of those folks yet. Next slide. Year to date, 4.7 versus our budgeted through October. Our new budget, I point out new budget, which was 3.8 million. If anybody remembers our original budget, before we did 2 amendments, it was 68,000 for the whole year. So we can breathe easy a little bit. And you can see for the year, we're at 24,24. You see that down there? So we're obviously ahead of schedule. Next slide. Walking through this, again, this would be important as we go into the budget. Parking, our #1 net cost center as far as net income. Aviation services, you see that up there. But down at the bottom, you see airfield and terminal, our biggest cost centers. And you might have heard me say on numerous occasions, they're designed to break even. But because we had to subsidize and not charge certain things to the airlines, those costs are lower to kind of keep us competitive. So, and these are long-standing stuff that we've done. But again, you can see on the terminal that is actually wiping away all of our parking money. See that? Everybody see that? And again, this includes the exciting CARES down there of $3.5 million. So without that CARES, things are a little different. Everybody follow that? Okay. Next slide. I wanted to really point this out because you kind of really see what's going on. We had an absolutely awful first quarter. I mean, epic. I mean, I didn't even think we were going to make the 68,000 the way the first quarter was going. It was that bad. But since the first quarter, we are maybe 1 or 2% below where we were in operating net income since 2019. We're pretty much neck and neck with that number since April. And that includes the closures that we had in September. So since April, things have gotten a lot better. You can see where we are versus some of our averages. And these all exclude CARES, so it's kind of apples to apples. Okay? Next slide. Cash flow, really important that we monitor our cash, particularly because of the number of capital investments we have and the cash drain that is. Go down, next slide, so that. Go back actually one. Go back. You can actually see this. Oh, no, right there. You can actually see this is actually going into our budget stuff. This is all the way out to the end of December here. And you see this number, this 800,000 here? See that 800, negative 800,000? Everybody see that? And the negative 422. That is our estimate of what we're going to have to give back to the airlines because our expenses have been lower than expected. Because they pay for expenses, so it's kind of a cost basis. So if we don't spend enough, we got to give it back to them. So that's our estimate at 800,000. And you can see the residual they were paying them from before, 318, and that's partly left over from 2019 because we slowly gave that back. And then the 422 is actually the money we owe them from 2020 that we didn't pay them yet. So as bad as 2020 was, we still had to give them $422,000. Next slide. And you can kind of see a lot of different things here. Again, we have contingencies in there because cash is really important. The debt service there, I kind of restarted the engine there in January. And originally we put that in there because we were doing the connector. But the connector, we haven't really absorbed the full debt service yet because we're paying for it as we use it. So that's just kind of a placeholder to make sure when we get ready to pay the full amount that we have the cash to pay for it. But you can see there at the bottom, 32, that the 2021 budget, our cost cash per day was $49,204 cash. That's when I say cash on hand per day. That's our cost that would cost us per day to run the airport. So it was 49,000 and change in 2021. So if there was something that shut down the airport, we would need 49,000 and change to kind of maintain things, keep paying people, doing all that other good stuff. And you can see for 2022 how much that number's went up. It's a little hard to see because of some of the stuff on the bottom here.
Scroll up a little.
I don't know if you can really scroll up there. Okay, there you go. But you can see it there, 59,000 now, almost $10,000 more because of the increase in the expenses. And you can see where we're starting with, and that's obviously at the end of November, but you can see that our cash goes from pretty flush to 96. Because what are we using it for? We're using it for our capital investments. And that's a big drain and obviously our expenses. But you can see that number really going down because of all of our investments in infrastructure. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay. I try to keep it short when we have a good month. So the finance guy can sit down and get back up, I guess, for our budget stuff.
So now we want to approve the
I'll
finance.
make a motion to accept.
Accept. Wrong word there. And then second, Glenn,
Second,
I've been ordered in this.
second.
all in favor? Aye.
That's good enough right here?
All right, you're accepted. Operating budget time.
I'm not allowed to move from this spot according to Professor back there. So I have to do it from here. And this is really a continuation of what we talked about last month, but this kind of finalized the numbers. And before I even talk about the budget, I do want to acknowledge Karen, who's in the back there. You see over there, she's kind of the eyes behind the curtain. She does a great job. Doesn't take a lot of credit, but she does a great job supporting me, and I couldn't do what I do without her and the rest of the team. But you start out with the operating budget vision. We always have to be financially responsible, strategic, and really manage expectations. And that part becomes real pivotal because last year, you can see, it was really much of a struggle. Things are a little bit better, but you always have to keep expectations in line with what our resources is because you don't want people thinking we have more or less than what we have. You want them to be in line. Next slide. It's always, as we talked about last month, the people. Great folks in there, not only our customers, but our employees. Next slide. Big projects for 2022, the runway, huge project. That's probably one of two major projects that we're doing in 2022, actually continuing in 2022, the runway. Next slide. And of course, the terminal connector. These are our goals. about them, but again, we have to manage our resources. Debt service is huge because that's a requirement. We certainly want to make sure we're in compliance with the bank. And one of the things that we did, along with that debt service, when we did the connector, we actually got that debt service coverage lowered. Because if we didn't, we actually would not meet it this year. Because the old number used to be 1.57, it was reduced to 1.25. Continue to invest in our future, organization, people, infrastructure, and remain flexible because we're still, anything could happen now. We're not out of the woods yet. Hopefully we're near the finish line, but we're certainly not out of the woods yet. And next slide, Jason. Key assumptions, really balanced budget. So we're using CARES and Sarissa. So after the end of 2022, all those funds will be gone. We'll have no more CARES and no more Sarissa. The budgeted net income before CARES was a negative 1.8. You see that? So as much as things are improving, if we didn't have CARES, we would be in a negative. And we're using that CARES to take us to a positive number of slightly over $2 million. Again, you'll see down there what some of the previous numbers were in other years, not that far out of line. But again, this is our communication of where we think we are at this point. Net revenue, I just mentioned that, and that includes the additional debt service for the connector and our continuing debt with BMO for the hangar, excuse me, and our debt from 2015. The other thing to keep in mind is for BMO, in 2020, we pushed back some of our debt for cash flow. So now we have to pay that back. So in 2022, there's an extra $1 million of debt service that we have to pay for. The budget assumes no significant adjustments as far as travel and government stuff. That's based on all of our estimates. They're really important down there. There's a delicate mix between taking care of our folks, operation and infrastructure, and keeping our prices to the point where we still have customers coming in the door. It's not as easy as just charge more money, hey, everybody's going to pay it. There's a balance because at some point folks have said we're going to do business elsewhere. So, next slide. Revenue-based budget. I always put that up there because for people that were here years back, we would do an expense-based budget, which is kind of a no-no. But we didn't have enough revenue, so we had to kind of cross our fingers and hope that we had enough revenue to cover the expenses that we need to cover. Now we're just going based on the actual revenue. Things have improved. So again, you see the CARES of 3.8. You can see the adjustments in our passengers. You can see that it's an uptick, not quite where we were in 2019, but we're expecting things to kind of move in that direction. You see that? Everybody see that? Because again, I've always said we're an activity-based business. If we don't have enough activity in here, we don't make any money. People got to come to the doors. They got to rent cars. They got to get on the planes. They got to park their cars. All that stuff is important for us as we move forward. Okay? Next slide. Payments, you can see that we're at 414 that we're estimating for 2022, and we're at 306 through October. So things are improving. And you can see a lot of our revenue kind of getting back to pre-pandemic levels. And we've really pushed the envelope, and that's part of the thing. We really pushed the envelope as far as what we could get as far as revenue. And we know, because, again, we have a lot of needs. We want to take care of our folks. Everything's out there. But there's a limit. And we know we can only do this so often. So that's part of the reason that there's a plan to kind of slowly wean off some of the ARPA money that's there, because this is going to be an adjustment from some folks. And we have our airline meeting coming up, and I'm sure they're going to express their displeasure with some of our increases in costs. But that's the way it goes. Next slide. You can really see it here in our FTEs. And FTEs, for people that don't speak FTEs, is 40 hours a week, because we have part-time folks. So we just break it into 40 hours. With the exception of the firefighters, they're a little bit more. I think they're 112 every 2 weeks. But for everybody else, it's 80 every 2 weeks. So you can kind of see what a full-time equivalent is And that kind of gives you an apples to apples. Right now, year to date, we are at 183. So that's pretty ambitious to get up to 234. You know, I mean, we're hoping, but I'm sure a lot of other businesses are hoping too, but that's why those resources are there. Our budget is one of integrity. So the resources are there, and hopefully the people will come at some point. Next slide. Important assumptions, we walked through COLA, some of that's assumptions. We have some of those are in the CBAs already. We follow those already. All the shift differentials, all that stuff is in there. 300,000, I know Mike Sturzik loves when I point out the 300,000. That's our budgeted number. Mike, I'm going to call on you on next Tuesday. Remember that 300,000, so write it down for me, please. Okay. And all of our insurance based on our latest renewals, which we didn't have when we did it last month. Next slide. Probably the most significant hit that you'll see in our budget is this number 5 here. That is our medical surplus. So we self-fund. So whenever we get a rebate, like in 2020, we got a $586,000 rebate. That showed as a negative expense in 2021, because that's when we got the money. So if that number is less, that means more expenses in 2022. So we're estimating $75K for 2022. Big difference from $586K. So that's going to be a huge difference that we're expecting, and that's based on what our insurance company is telling her about the return to people going back and getting a lot of work done that they didn't do last year. Pension, really important to focus on that one. Remember when we had our MMO meetings and everybody was in there and we talked about funding more to make sure that pension is funded? That's paying for it. And we're also going to take care of some of the folks who have the defined contributions. They're going to get a little extra when we do that as well. Excuse me, defined, yeah, I think that's right, defined contribution. And our employee medical contributions, we try to keep them in that 6 to 7% range of total costs. That's medical for employee independent. Next slide. We estimate unemployment about 2%. That's just because we self-insure. We have about 2% estimated for that number. That's just kind of a placeholder. Some years that's a good number. Recently, not so much. But again, 0% increase in workman's comp. That's another one of our big hits. And you can see that, and that's just assuming for next year because we don't know what that renewal is. Everything else consistent with, following the CBAs or continuance of some of our plans that we have in place. And just for budgeting purposes, you see that down there, that employee and child coverage. That just shows you the kind of the integrity of our budget. Some folks, when they budget new folks on the lowest cost was employee to kind of artificially make the numbers lower. They say every new employee that comes in is an employee only. But what we do is we kind of use employee and child as kind of an average, so it's a little bit more conservative than just using all employees because obviously family coverage costs more than employee coverage. Next slide. And this is kind of running through the numbers, just kind of see, and this is versus our August budget. You can see that there. And again, you can see the increase in the revenue. That's where everything comes from. Next slide. See our expenses up again. Can you go up a little? Oh, it's on the next slide. So I'll go to the next slide there. So that you can see our net income. That's a really important number to focus on. That 9 million number there. You see that? And that number down there, that 8.7, or call it 8.8. That is really that's kind of our cash from operating. That's kind of what we generate from cash from our operating. Next slide. Normally you'll see that depreciation number, and as Darren has told me on numerous occasions, it's not a real number, it's an accountant number. It's not something that the real world, but actually that number that we have in there for depreciation is an accounting number, and for all intents and purposes, it is a very conservative number when you think about infrastructure, because that number is the book value of assets that we are depreciating. So think about it this way. You have a car, and the normal life on a car is 5 years, okay? So you buy a car for $50,000. We expense that car $10,000 a year for 5 years. How much is that car worth in year 8? 0 on our books, so there's nothing there. Now, you go to buy that same car, you think it costs you $50,000 now? That same car is going to cost you $75,000, and it's going to all hit on your depreciation. So because we're kind of reinvesting on ourselves, and we had all these years where we just had, things that we should have bought that we didn't, they have low book value, that now that number is going up. That number is actually raising about 9.2, 9.3% per year over the last 10 years. That just shows you how much of our continued investment in infrastructure. But again, that 2.8 million is not as much a representative of that 8 million. That 8.8 is kind of what Ryan uses to pay for some of his infrastructure. And that's certainly what we use to pay for our debt service and some of our leases. And I'll talk about that a little later. Next slide. And here's what when you talk about revenue, where does all that money go? How do we follow that revenue? So there is, if you count all of our revenue, Queen City, CARE, Sarissa, Braden, all of that revenue, it comes out to approximately $37 million. Well, our number one expenditure is salary and wages. 33% of all revenue is spent on salary and wages. Next biggest item is all other items, which is 28, and that would be, solicitor. I know the judge makes all 10 million of that, but utilities and a lot of other stuff. And then we have our employee benefits, 15% of that. See that? That's a big number. Debt service that I talked about before, lease payments, that's what I was saying. Those are the numbers that really, that free cash covers. So when you think about what do you pay for with that $8.8 million? You pay for that debt service, you pay for that lease payments. I know what's left, you give my big contribution to Ryan for $1.2 million. And what's the overall capital budget this year? 26.3. So I'm making a huge, contribution to him. That's why you saw that cash number going down, because, we have to keep investing, should I say keep borrowing, to pay for some of this stuff, because we don't have the cash, we start running out of it relatively quickly. Next slide. Cash flow, again, really important, kind of continuation of what we just went through with the financials. You can go to the next slide. Going all the way through, because we've kind of went through this before. You can, again, see how we go down. And that's why cash is going down, because if we had enough cash based on our operations, that cash on hand would pretty much stay the same. It wouldn't go down because we would use whatever we get from operations. But because we don't, we're using available cash we have, borrowed money, and that's why that cash is going down. Next slide. Really important here, goes back to what I talked about. Our biggest cost centers are airfield and terminal. And we do our best to try to keep our rates competitive because we want to solicit new business as well as keep our existing business. Our rate in February, because we did an adjustment on how we calculate the terminal, was $5.15 for landing fees. We were able to reduce that to $4.82. We see that over here? Remember I said we got about 3.8 million of CARES in our budget? We're using 1.1 million of that 3.8 to lower that landing fee. Because if we didn't, that number will be 5.84. Not exactly something that they get excited about when you go from a negative 6.4 increase to almost a 14% increase. So again, trying to make sure that our rates are semi-competitive, even though we're trying to do what we can to take care of our folks and our infrastructure. And then you can see what happened on the terminal. So we use another $1 million, and we call it a revenue share, which is kind of a nice way of saying us giving you a break. So you can see that out of our 3.8, 2.8 and change is going to the airlines to keep their rates lower. So, because if we didn't do that, that rate would be over 100 and would certainly send off alarms. Because there's a certain, we talk about the psychological numbers when you go from 99 to 100. Certainly, if you go from 75 to over 100, you're going to get people's attention, and that's not what we wanted to do. But you can see it would have been a 40% increase instead of a 17.4% increase. And actually, what we did is we actually went back to kind of where we were 1/1/20 on the terminal rate. Everybody see that? But again, that's why it's so important to kind of strategically use that CARES, because if we didn't have that, it's a different conversation going to them saying it's 584 versus 482. Next slide. Again, I just want to remember, this is our main focus, our people. And our two main projects, obviously, our terminal and our runway. Any questions? I know I went through a lot of stuff there, but it's important that people really understand this, because any extra money that we get, we don't have shareholders, it goes back into our infrastructure. And because we had the WBF years ago, everybody remembers the WBF, and we had that lawsuit? For folks that are new, and that crippled this organization for years, and a lot of infrastructure that we needed to do, we weren't able to do, we just didn't have the money. So now we've been trying to catch up for the last 5-6 years, and you can see that any money we get, we want to use on infrastructure to kind of continue to develop the airport and expand revenue, and then obviously that puts us in a position to take care of our folks and our operations. Any questions? Did I move too far there, Colin? That was good? Okay. Colin said I'm not allowed to go out of my little circle here, so I'm trying to stay in my little circle. All right, thank you. I think it's up to you for a vote to
Approve the budget. Motion to approve the budget.
Board, right?
So moved.
Oh,
So
so,
moved.
let me just say, you're motioning to move this vote to the board on Tuesday. You got the first and second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right. Approval of Exhibit B.
I'll do this one.
Okay,
I'm on
Tom.
a roll here. And I'll keep this very short. This is basically the Schedule B that has all the rates in it that we just talked about. So this has to be a separate approval. Pretty much everything we just talked about, it just kind of lines them out as part of the separate exhibit that we're putting in. And here, for folks that don't know, we have kind of a signatory rate and a non-signatory rate. So if you sign an agreement with us, then you get the lower rate. If you don't, you pay 7% more. Okay, so that's all reflected in here. Any questions? Pretty cut and dry. Okay, thank you.
Internet is unstable. Do we, and then, we're gonna move, we're gonna
That one,
recommend this to the board as well.
Correct.
First and second,
So moved. Second. Moved.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Airport Capital Improvement Program?
That's right, I need a break.
Yeah. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So a lot of this we went through, in the last month committee, so I'll go through really what has changed and what is obviously included in the capital budget, operating budget right now. But we talked through a little bit about our approach for the budget. The big thing that we added to Exhibit A that I'll show in a minute is to kind of give a frame of reference, the total program cost of the projects. So if they're in different phases, if they're ongoing, if they're on the tail end, you'll kind of see where total cost was, but really what are our expenses or costs, should I say, in 2022. Again, as Todd mentioned, built upon the cash flow, tying into the numbers that he just showed you with the days on hand and then the timing with our payments as well as our grant reimbursements associated with those projects as well. And you'll see the breakdown of the different exhibits that's in the overall plan. Again, we talk about this investing in infrastructure, as Todd just mentioned, some of the last 5 years, some of the costs, which he alluded to, and I'll show in a minute. For 2022, we're showing about a $48 million total cost with about 26.3 of LNAA share. Last year, I believe it was 45 million total with about 19 and change LNAA share, just for reference. So here's kind of the first piece of Exhibit A. So I mentioned the far left column, you'll see the total program cost. And just as a reference, we talked before about the runway. Due to the timing, we still show the different phases as they're broken out, but you can see the first one, $19 million grant. We're on the tail end, so we're really showing only $1.9 million paying in 2022. And then you can see the breakdown of our share, which includes the grants that we have in there. The one big thing that we included, as Todd mentioned, to be conservative and really what we're trying to push with the connector is the cost from what we were assuming timeframe wise went up in terms of the schedule, compressing the schedule to try and do as much as we can next year in 2022. So that's reflected there by showing the costs there with some costs rolling into 2023 as well. And again, you see all the other projects there that we talked about last month. Yeah, sure.
When is it in the plan for Braden's runway to get done? Is that ever?
So it's on our airport, it's a unofficial airport layout plan that we have at Braden that I believe it's in the third phase that we have, but it's shown on there, and I don't believe it's in the next 5 years that we have it, which are on some of the other exhibits.
So it's after the next 5 years, like?
Yeah, in terms of planning, we have it shown. Some of the things we're doing now is actually look at some of the obstructions around that area, just to do some of the preliminary planning to know what would need to be done as part of it. But it is on the plan for the future. And in the other exhibits, you'll see in the budget show, the next 3 to 5 years, some of the other projects at the other airports as well. So we talked a little bit about this last month as well. We made some revisions based on the funding available, as we talked about, and then just in terms of some of the strategy that we're working through. So I won't necessarily go through all of them since we talked last time, but the big one, which we had a lot of conversations on, as you may recall, was about the parking garage. So really what we were doing, so the wording I think last time was a little misleading, so we changed it in terms of really where we are is working through the feasibility and engineering design to determine if and when it makes sense to do the project based on obviously the cost, what do we get out of it from a revenue perspective, but then the big piece of looking at it is it frees up the available land that we're looking at for future non-aeronautical development that Darren's been talking about and we've all been planning for. So it's still strategically important to do, but it's not necessarily saying once we're done, okay, we're starting later in the year. So there's still more to done, still more to do, but again, it's important to continue moving that forward. So we as a team and then ultimately the board can make the decision of what the next step will be.
Ryan, can I ask you a question on that?
Sure.
At the time that we were looking at that, there were 3 different locations. Have any of the 3 been ruled out?
Yeah, the preferred location right now is the E-lot, the employee parking lot right next to the terminal. So it doesn't impact our existing parking because we're looking at the short-term lot. And in terms of constructability, ease of access, closest to the terminal, it really gives you all of those benefits. So the first step was obviously the site location, and now it's honing in on the employee lot next to the terminal.
So the lot over by what the official title is?
The employee lot, so right past the terminal, E-lot, right past the terminal, just that location.
The lot where you guys work.
Yeah. No,
I
but
know,
I mean
it's
the
true,
lot
it's not
over on the other side, over towards Air Products. That one was also being considered at some point too.
Yeah, yep, economy lot area where the multimodal is right now.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Yep, no problem. So again, that's part of some of that analysis of what some of the next steps are. So more to come on that as we continue moving forward. And you'll see some of the projects listed before. We talked about the EMAS bed, retape that's required. We actually budgeted for one of them next year just because of the cost with those. So we'll phase that accordingly with what we need to do. Again, talked about some of the other ones in there, but it's all included, again, in the cash flow and the timing with what we're looking to do. Again, going down the list, the 2021 allocated capital projects are projects that were completed or going to be completed in the next month and a half, but residual payments roll into next year. So rather than showing some of those, we just kind of consolidate with ones that we're closing out. And then that cumulative department spending, the $2.3 million, is what's shown on Exhibit B as the breakout. And you can see the 2 numbers we mentioned, the $48 million total cost and about 26.3 LNAA share. So with the Exhibit B, again, there's a lot of projects on there, but they're categorized into the different prioritization levels. So you see the amount of projects. There's 10 what we'll call emergency that we're actually working on right now. Some of those were taken from the 2021 budget adjustment from August and rolling into next year. Business critical, regulatory, and high. And just as a clarification, the budget, the cash flow, everything that's shown in Exhibit A is the first three categories, the 2.3 million. The prioritization number 4, those 15 projects are shown on the list, working with our procurement manager based on supply chain impacts or any prioritization that might change. They're critical projects we need to do, but they're not as high of a priority as some of the other ones that are identified. So we've done to kind of help us manage the timing of what all the other departments need, but then also the timing of when you place an order for something, when it's actually going to come, and then be put into service. So it's kind of a quick rundown with some of the projects. Again, it's connected to the cash flow. It's connected to the budget in terms of the numbers that Todd just went through. So unless anyone has any questions, that's all I have.
Any other questions there? And we're going to accept this for presentation to the board as well. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mike. Second, Glenn. All in favor?
Second. Second.
Aye. All right.
Aye. Hello?
We got you. Thank you. The lease line from Univest for equipment.
That will be me.
That's Todd.
Just wanted to discuss this with the group. We got an offer sheet from Univest. I've been really pouncing on them a little bit because they didn't join the consortium. So see what they could offer as far as lease line. What I want to do is give us more than one lease line. So we're talking to some other banks because we got a lot of needs. We got more than one lease line to help us with some of the capital infrastructure that we talked about. So I just wanted to kind of put it out there to the committee so they know we're looking at this. We'll probably bring it back once I have a little bit more time to look at it and see what else is out there in January. And it's just basically lifts it up a little bit so that really just talking, we got about $2 million to use, one for equipment and vehicles, a floor of about 3.5, Wall Street prime plus 25 basis points. So it's a little high, but it will be backed by whatever assets we use to on the lease line. So if we use it for a vehicle, that's really the collateral, nothing else. So again, we need a few of these, $2 million. We actually had, I think, 3 with BMO, and that line has just expired. So we've reached out to them and a few other banks, but I just wanted to kind of inform the committee since we got a formal offer from Univest. Any questions? Okay, I don't like the group to be surprised. That's why I put that out there. All right, thank you.
Any action required on that?
No, I think we're going to wait on that for now. Like I said, I just wanted the group to know that we did get an offer from them, and then that way if you see Univest say we did look at your offer and we're thinking about it.
Well done. Good month. Good budget. Is there any new business?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Mike.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Good job, Frank.
Thanks, Glenn.
Good job, Frank.
So Mike John needs about 2 or 3 minutes.
2 or 3 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. So we can take 2 or 3 minutes, if people.
Oh, thank you. Before.
Looks like his phone is muted.
I think his phone is muted.
We can
Can you hear me?
Hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you, Mike. Can you hear us?
Barely, but I can hear you.
How about you turn the volume up on your computer?
Keeps popping up, this address is invalid.
Huh. Not sure. That would be.
Maybe I could get a coffee after this. I was just thinking of that.
Sorry, could you unmute?
Of course. I like doing it twice.
I'm sorry.
Do you want to get started, Mike?
Pardon me?
Would you like to get started?
Yes, I would. So let's go.
All right.
We'll call the meeting to order, and I apologize for being this distant, but the minutes of the last meeting were distributed to you by email. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes?
No.
If there are none, then I'll accept the motion to accept the minutes as distributed.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Please. Okay, well, all those in favor, then please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'll tell you, this is a mess. I apologize to everybody. We have two reports to share this morning. And I think Ryan's on first.
Yep, yeah, thanks, Mike. All right, so we'll run through the November updates as normally do for capital projects. Again, talking about the runway, we mentioned before, multiple phases of where we are. I was thinking though, so I'll show some of the photos, but it'd be easier to go through the overall graphic with where we are. But package 1 ongoing, some of the paving, centerline lighting in package 2. Package 3, they actually just finished the grooving just the other day on the runway from the paving we did during the closures in September. Package 4, they're working on taxiway Echo North. You can see there they're doing some of the under drain. They haven't rehabilitated the pavement yet, but they've narrowed it based on the requirements and the design standards there. But kind of putting all that together, again, I figure it'd be easier. So all of the light blue is area that's substantially complete. So where they're working now with the various phases, as I mentioned, so taxiway Echo North doing the work here outside of the safety area so they can do work during the day. At night, they're doing some of the amended soils that's required by the Conservation District in this area. They're working on the center line lighting within the intersection as well as along the runway. And for next year, as we've talked about before with Midfield West, we'll call it getting some approval to use some of the remaining grant funds in those existing packages is paving this center piece here, the Midfield West, we'll call it the runway. And then next year, working on taxiway Gulf, which is relocating Alpha 3 to the west here. So Gulf was, we were trying to do that this year, but due to the lead time to get the fiber optic cable, as well as some approvals from the FAA, we pushed that to next year. And then due to some of the weather, in terms of paving that Midfield West, we'll do in the spring as well. So again, still on grant funding. It's all included in our cash flow and budget, but that's kind of an overview of some of the packages. And again, just trying to be strategic in using all the available grant funding so it doesn't disappear. Passenger Boarding Bridge project, we're in the final stages, the phase 3 of 3, the 3-year contract that we've done. You can see on the right the ones that we've done the last few years. They're working on Bridge 2 right now. All the parts are in except for the carpet, and they're going to be on site next week until about mid-December to finish those repairs. One thing to note just for the committee that we were just notified of the other week is being in the final stages of the contract obviously makes this easier, but Ameribridge, who's the contractor, has unofficially notified LNAA that they're shutting down their operations and potentially going into receivership. So I talked to the judge the other day. We haven't gotten anything official, so nothing has changed on our end, but what we're obviously doing is making sure they're finishing the work that they're doing and then following up with whatever's required with warranty coverage, final payment, turnover documents. So the silver lining is we're on the tail end of this. Again, a reputable contractor that just, assuming due to the pandemic and everything else, has really not fared very well. But again, our biggest concern is really just the coverage and getting what we need from the turnover document perspective. And then if something happens with that receivership, who are we paying? But as of right now, the not outstanding bills, but what they're working on is maybe about $20,000. So just working through that, but just wanted to make the committee aware. Let's see. Again, moving on to Queen City. With some of the obstruction removal, some good updates this past month. 100% of the original scope tree removal we mentioned was removed. That additional green area was also removed this past week. It was actually the only week that the Police Academy shooting range was closed, so they went in, you can see in the middle there, removed some of those trees. And then we also coordinated with the City of Allentown and planted some of the trees you can see there on the right, as well as Mack trucks and some of the other residential properties that were done as well. So really the last thing here is coordinating with the contractor in the city on the site cleanup, and then in the spring confirming, everything has been growing, the seed has stabilized, and then working with the conservation district on the ENS controls. So be good to get that one completed, and again, just tracking to make sure that everything's done according to what the city and Mack trucks was expecting in terms of the replantings.
What kind of trees are those?
What kind of trees are there? I have to look, I can't recall.
We typically avoid sequoias and other really tall.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, because that was my thought, like you replanted trees and you want to make sure that you don't have to do this
Again.
Yeah.
And so we have actually a list of species of trees that are native, that are generally not a very tall growing tree, but also we tend to look for trees that aren't fruit producing, that would attract wildlife. So,
I know those birds and squirrels.
yeah, birds mixed in with airplanes is never a
Yeah.
great idea. But so it's typically a list that we've had over the years that working with a lot of our consultant teams that we know are trees that work, and certainly working with the Parks Department, they may have even had some thoughts on the trees that they wanted over there and might have picked from that list. So
Yeah, and the benefit of working with the city, with the parkway being as large as it is, technically from the FAA's perspective, you can plant them anywhere on the property. It doesn't have to be where we removed them. So where we planted those is actually
They're off to the side.
just off to the side of where the creek is.
Yeah. So I
So
wondered if that was like strategic too, insofar as you thought like maybe that wouldn't be a highly impactful area in the future where you'd have to.
that's the hope,
That's
is
the
that
hope.
we're not going to recreate that. There was some
Yeah.
thought back at the time, I think, because you can see the police academy and the shooting range there. There was some thought at the time to kind of screen that a little bit more. Unfortunately, with the airport runway end right there, over time the trees just got too tall. So
Okay.
and there is a grade drop off there as well that helps that piece. But
Yeah.
that was the big thing, working with the city and just saying, hey, we have all these trees. Where do you want to put them? I think they picked 2 different kinds that they split up
Okay.
with their arborist folks. So
All right, great.
the rehab design, nothing really new here, just progressing. Again, looking for the grant funding in spring of next year. So we're working through the bid documents right now. Try and get those finalized in December, but likely go out to bid January, February timeframe. What we heard on our annual FA meeting a couple weeks ago is last year they had moved up the grant deadline to May. They're probably going to try and move it up again to April timeframe, which what they're trying to do, which makes sense, is getting the grants earlier in next year so we can actually start construction in June, July versus getting the grant in September and then, winter's right around the corner. So it makes sense. It's just pushing things forward, which is fine by us. So working through that. The one thing I wanted to kind of put up here, so as you may recall, we have airside, landside, on-call paving contractors that we use. This was an area that was brought up actually by Ted Rosenberger a while back regarding a pretty significant dip in the pavement going into the bulk hangers right here, obviously coordinating with Darren and his team, Kimmy down there, as well as you can see the area in front of the terminal that after it rains, the water sits there for probably about a week. So working with our one of our on-call contractors, Barker & Barker, We're getting the price in the next few days, but the estimate's somewhere around $140,000 to make the repairs. Paving, as well as, you can see that electrical handhold, making some of the repairs there that's in this area, as well as pavement above that electrical duct bank there. So if weather cooperates, we'll finish that in December. If not, we'll come back and do some of the work in next year, as well as looking at doing a potential seal coating in front of that whole hangar area to extend the life of the pavement. That's in, some of the areas are in pretty good shape, so giving it some more life without spending a lot of money is what we're trying to do there as well. So again, just coordinating with the folks down there to minimize impacts and only work at one area at a time. So working through that. And then Braden, we talked a lot last month. There's actually been a lot of progress since the last meeting. Basically, the land development agreements that we were waiting on from the township solicitor received. We reviewed them, executed them, sent them back. The escrow funds that they've required were sent to the township just this past week. And then we're working with our bank to get the letter of credit, got the language reviewed by the township. They're good with it. So once we get the letter of credit, if not this week to the holidays, early next week, we'll coordinate with the township and pick up the permits, and we'll be off and moving. So again, hoping the weather cooperates as it sometimes does, knock on wood, in December. So we'll continue to move that forward, and then work with Colin to get some information out with the timing. But at least we're past that hurdle and one step closer, which is great. And then just a brief update on the road widening right out front. All the work has been completed. They did a final project walkthrough this past week, working on the final punch list items, and they're hoping to wrap up, get all their remaining pieces of equipment or some of their cones out by the end of the month. And just as a recap, their originally contracted end date was in January, so we're happy to get out and get everything done. So still working with them on, there were some light timing issues that we were concerned with that we're trying to work with them on, I think I mentioned before. But in general, it's good to see that done. It actually helps us getting out during rush hour at this point with that third lane coming through there. And again, the summary of where we are, updating some of the expenditures to date. Again, no major changes in terms of our amendments to date or change orders as part of the projects. You can see kind of the list there. But again, with the runway, the big piece is trying to take advantage of all the grant funding we have, and then looking to close out a lot of those early next year once all the final work has been done there. So that's everything. So anyone has any questions?
I do. The ILSs are down for Norton right now.
Yes.
Do we have an update on those? I think that they're only noted for a day. But then we also have the CAP 2 on 6.
Yep.
I know that's the FAA's. It's not really under the LNA's responsibility, but do they communicate with you very well? I mean, do we know when those are going to be back up and going?
No, that's a good question. Yeah, we've actually been talking to some of the carriers that have asked some of the same questions. So the FAA usually does communicate some of the work they're doing. Sometimes we have to poke them for the information, but yeah, the Cat 1 ILS, other than some minor testing they're doing, is up and running, other than a day out here or there for work they're doing. Cat 2, Steve and I were reaching out to them. When they relocated the localizer as part of their project, they have to do their required 45-day burn-in. So they're doing that now. So Cat 2 should be back up and running. I think it was mid-December what they told us. So.
Okay, so that's better because the estimate that's published right now is February. But I know, like when we had the fog this last week, they weren't able to get in because of that.
Yep.
So,
yeah, so
I mean, that's a 767 can't get in. So.
And that's what we had kind of mentioned to them, and that's obviously why we got the Cat 2 and working with the FAA to shorten that time as much as they can. But yeah, that's something we're keeping an eye on and trying to make sure when we have our airline stakeholder calls, monthly calls about the runway, we at least get an update from the FAA on where they are in their process to make sure everyone's aware.
Are the cargos the only one who use the Cat 2, or some of the airlines use Cat 2? Just cargo, okay. My other question is on the existing Braden terminal. what's there right now? Does LNAA own it and will resell it? Or are they just leasing it, and when the permanent one goes in, they just return it?
Yeah, we're leasing it, yeah.
Okay.
So once it's put in.
Because it's 2 trailers, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Good questions.
Any further questions for Ryan? Then Ryan, thank you very much. Extremely well done. Next is an air service update for Darren.
Thanks, Mike. I'll go up here and stand on the spot. Hopefully I can do a better job than Todd did of standing in my place, but we'll see. So we're just gonna go through a little bit on sort of what's going on in the industry and then just a little bit about what we've been up to here as well. So you heard Todd say it, we're not quite out of the woods yet as far as COVID goes. There's still some challenges. You know, these are across the board staffing issues. We're seeing it here. Every airport, every airline we've spoken to is seeing it. Longer term, we still have the pilot shortage challenge. That hasn't gone away. In fact, it's come back with a vengeance, you know, so that is going to be, we're going to be dealing with that one for a while. See the fleet constraints, airlines, they took the opportunity during COVID to retire some older aircraft. So now they're, you know, slowly building their fleets back, but you can see like American, 156 less aircraft than what they had back in 2019, Delta 258 less. More of a shorter term problem with a solution. They do have aircraft on order, but that'll take a few years to build back up. Obviously major losses in 2020 for the airline industry, lots of debt, and an intense pressure to reduce costs, which we certainly feel every time we get them on the phone. So, and then the business travel thing, you know, everybody was projecting business travel coming back in September, and the Delta variant had different ideas on that. So we're still seeing, you know, maybe 50% of business travel. Important to remember, that's where the money comes from for the airlines. It's not leisure travel that drives the money, it is the business travel. And you're not seeing, you know, the larger companies aren't back in their offices yet, so they're not traveling. And the real big one, some of those large consulting firms, those are the road warriors, and they're not traveling. So hopefully, you know, as you're talking to the airlines, they're expecting to see this start to come back, you know, early next year. But again, we'll wait and see what the virus decides to do in the next several months. And then fuel prices. I mean, this was staggering to me, up 279% since April of 2020. You know, when fuel is high, fuel prices are high, that is the #1 expense for the airlines. So, and, you know, Brian, probably number one expense for you guys as well, you know, so, you know, that is huge, and that will continue to affect airline decisions as we go forward until that gets under control. So all that being said, this is what happens when these things happen. We've seen it throughout the pandemic. A lot of airports have lost service through this. We are fortunate. We did not lose any carriers at this point in time, but the threat's still there. You know, we're not seeing that it's imminent. We don't have any reason to believe we'll lose a carrier, but I also wouldn't say I would be horribly shocked if we heard from the carriers that they had to make changes, you know. So again, you see a lot of them around us, Wilkes-Barre, Williamsport, you know, Stewart, New Haven, a lot in this area that have lost a lot of service. Again, it's just what I just said on the first slide, you know. We need to get through some of these challenges before this risk really starts to go away for the regional airports. So that was the bad news. Now we're going to get to a little bit better news. We kind of use this same subset of peer airports to compare. You know, obviously Wilkes-Barre, Atlantic City, and Harrisburg because of their proximity to us here. Flint and South Bend because they're similar airports to us. They're both, you know, positioned in close proximity to a major hub, similar markets. So the good thing is you can see we're back to December, our December scheduled seats. We're back to within 2% of what we had in 2019. So great news for us. A lot of that being led by the ultra low cost carriers, and in this case Allegiant. But you can see where some of these other airports have really not gotten close to recovery yet. The peer average is about 21% down. Overall, U.S. average is about 12% down, somewhere in that neighborhood. So again, we're doing way better than what you're seeing, you know, across the board. So good news. Hopefully we can continue that. And again, like I just said, low-cost carriers are driving that recovery. It's a leisure market. You can see Allegiant's 112% of what they were in 2019. So again, thankfully they're a great partner to us. Thankfully we opened that base prior to COVID. The crew base, timing is everything, right? see what we're looking at in spring. Allegiant right now is projecting 28% increase in capacity from April 2019. Connie, don't fall off your chair when I say that, because we are going to have a lot more flights than we had a couple years ago. So. Tom was afraid for me to put that in the slide, because he didn't know if you had have you realized that just yet. So. But truly, I mean, it's great news for us that we have, like I said, we have those partners. But you can see where the legacy carriers are, they're not quite there yet. They're building, and it's going to take that business travel for them to really get back there. So that's sort of the state of what's going on in the industry. Recently, we've been out trying to get back out, talking to folks, meeting with airlines, meeting with, our peers. Attended a couple of conferences recently, the Airport Roundtable. We do usually 2 of those a year. I really like those conferences. They're a little smaller, usually about 50 attendees, but they usually have 3 to 5 airlines in attendance as well. So you get some really good face-to-face time with the airlines, sort of not scheduled, not formal face-to-face time, which I think sometimes is way better than the sort of the formal meetings. And then Takeoff North America, that's the total opposite. That is scheduled 20-minute meetings with the airlines. Again, very valuable to us. Great meetings with all these folks, honestly. We heard a lot of really good things from them. I think generally what we heard from them was, we like AV, we want to continue to grow in AV. We're not doing any growth in 2022, really. 2022 is really going to be about rebuilding for these folks. And growth starts to pick up in 2023, which, if you look at what Brian's talked about with capital projects, runway project, connector project, things like that, 2023 is a really good time for us to start getting back to growth. So it's not such a bad thing. As we start looking at next year, just looking at the early conferences, we're going to get back at it right away in January at Air Cargo Conference. We don't talk a lot about air cargo when I do these updates, but we talk about the passenger traffic, but a lot of our commercial airline traffic is air cargo. So we'll be going to that one actually with the folks from AFCO that we're working on cargo development. So hopefully doing some targeted meetings there. And then back to Routes Americas, which is again, sort of the speed dating. So this just becomes a constant conversation as much as we can get in front of these folks. Actually planning to be out quite a bit next year. We put a little bit of money. I had to fight Todd a lot to get some money in there for travel, but we have quite a bit of, additional travel money next year as we try to get back into the swing of getting back in front of folks and meeting with them as much as we can. So happy that another thing that sort of fell off during COVID was our air service focus group, we called it. We're actually rebranding as the Air Service Task Force.
Is that the same suit?
That is not the same suit. It's really not, I swear. It's close, but it's not. Thank you.
Okay, all right, well, that was live.
Thank you.
So let's just pay attention to details, right?
So we held this as a kickoff. We did a webinar with the task force. We had about 17 folks attend. Right now, we've done some outreach after that just to gauge interest from getting those companies to join the task force, put some representatives on it. Frank Fasciano, thank you for stepping up to be one of our co-chairs in the MBOM. We've always sort of had a chair from the board and a chair from industry, so those two are our co-chairs on this right now. And the plan is to get back to regular meetings in 2022, and by regular, we're going to do these probably about twice a year with this one.
I ran into 2 folks that were on the call that really liked the presenter.
Awesome. We had our consultant, Brad, who's done some presentations for the board too. He always does well. He gives a lot of information and he takes a lot of time, but it does, but it was good information. Frank, was there anything else you wanted to add about that meeting?
No, again, this is designed so Darren has the fact that we have an air service task force in his pocket when he talks to the airlines, and that seems to impress them. Yep. And then also to get feedback from the most traveled businesses in the area, and to let them know what we're doing.
Yep. So yeah, so we'll keep updating on this, but like I said, hopefully we'll get this group back on track starting next year. So, and I can't believe Matt's not here for this one. I even put a little Spanish in here for Matt, so I'm not going to say it now since he's not here because I'm certain that I won't.
What's that one?
Yes.
Same one. So, but so we're working on, I think all of us know this is an important market for us here in the Valley. If we could get direct service to San Juan, I think the survey says it would be very popular. We did a survey. I don't think the results of the survey were surprising to any of us. We kind of expected that. What was a little surprising was the immense response we got to the survey. We literally shut the survey down in about the first hour because the response was so high. it tripped basically like a circuit breaker in the system because they thought it could be a bot instead of actually humans filling it out because it was happening that fast. So it was quite popular. Thanks in part to a lot of our partners. We worked with Mega Radio to get the word out. We worked with the Ortiz Art Foundation in Allentown to get, so they really got it out. When I texted Victor from Mega the day we put it up while he was on the radio. And he said it on the radio and the thing broke an hour later. He's calling me saying people can't get in. So because the response was unbelievable. So, which is great. It's good stuff that we will continue to work with that with the airlines. So we're going to use that data as we talk to the airlines. This is not going to be an easy destination for us to get. I do want, we want to manage expectations a bit. It's not likely to be served by American, United, Delta. I would be incredibly surprised if they were to serve it. This is going to probably be a low-cost carrier, and I would say when we started, it's probably going to be a 2-day-a-week type service until we see how it goes. So there are carriers out there to do it. As we've talked to a lot of them, Allegiant doesn't currently serve San Juan, but some of the airlines, Spirit does, JetBlue does, Sun Country does, Frontier does, So we're talking to all of them about it. I think that's where we're going to be able to make that connection. The one other thing, there's been some interest from folks in the community about trying to put together some charter service there. So that has proved to be an effective tool in the past to prove a route. It was actually done here way back in the Lehigh Valley Air days prior to Allegiant coming here. So we're working on that. It's not easy. It's not inexpensive. So we'll take a lot of community support to make it work, but we're going to keep trying to see if we can find a way to do that. And we're just continue to work with the folks in the Hispanic community. They're obviously very excited about trying to get this route. Not just here in the Valley, but I think as we look outside the Valley, let's face it, Berks County, Reading has a gigantic Hispanic population as well. There's a lot of area we can pull for this that we probably typically don't pull travelers from. I think that's everything. Oh, not quite everything. Last slide here. Just a little summary here. Again, we are going to still see challenges next year. Next year is still looking like rebuilding and recovery with hopefully growth returning in 23. Leisure travel is what's leading the way right now. It's not the worst thing. It's kind of not bad for us, but for the airlines, it's just not the high profit that they're looking for. But again, that crew base here is helping us recover much faster than our peers, as you saw earlier. And we're well positioned for that future ultra low cost carrier growth. There is going to be demand pressure back in Newark, back in Philly. As that happens, costs are going to go up there. Those carriers are going to look for lower cost alternatives, other places where they can operate, and we're in a great spot for that. So. Just as I say at the bottom there, it's going to take a lot of patience, planning, and partnership. So that patience, we're going to have to live with it. Nothing ever happens quick enough for me, but we'll have to be a little patient on this one. The planning and partnerships part goes back to the whole travel piece and just continuing to work with our airlines and being in front of them as much as we can. That's all I got. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I have two.
Darren, thanks a lot. Do we have any questions for Darren?
Yeah, I think we have one in the room, Mike.
All right.
So did you not have a career fair on November 4th? And how did recruitment go at that career fair? Because staffing issues was one of the things that you talked about.
Yeah, so I know we had a number of folks come through. I don't know if we have official stats on how many personnel we were able to. I know we had a number of applicants and interviews.
We got a decent amount of.
But it wasn't like an overwhelming response.
No.
It was
just
not.
like a trickle in.
No, but what's
It
funny,
was not.
when we were at that airport roundtable, we were talking to some of the other airports, and they've done them too. And the numbers that, nobody's getting big numbers showing up to these, unfortunately, Even larger airports and larger markets where they're getting 50 people to show up at a job fair that they do,
Wow.
so.
Because when I was knocking on doors, there was people who were saying they needed jobs, and I said, November 4th, go to the airport.
Yes,
You work in
absolutely.
hospitality, you work in housekeeping.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah, it's amazing, Tara. I've had several conversations with people as well and say, go to the airport, and I'm not sure they do. Apparently they're not.
I know, I even tried to recruit my barista,
Yeah.
and I thought that would be a good one.
We'd like to
They
have
were
a brief on staff,
complaining-
that'd be
They were
fantastic.
complaining about
Yeah,
it.
apparently we need one in here.
Okay, so my other question then, so staffing is still gonna be just a slow moving?
And not just for the airport, the airlines are having staffing
Every
issues,
place
major
is
staffing.
having.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And you're even offering what, incentives now too?
We are.
What's your incentives? What are your incentives?
It really depends on the position.
sign-on bonuses and have you increased the wages or?
Yes.
Yeah, how
We made
significantly?
wage adjustments. On some of the positions, I don't have all the stats.
Some of the
We can
positions
certainly
are
get
pretty
those for
significant.
you.
Are we talking about like a $15 an hour job that someone could get here now?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Almost.
because I talked to people about the mobility factor, and I always use it as an example, Tom. I was like, yeah, you could be in this room with us, you might be cleaning planes today, but like you
That's right.
might be in this room at some point,
That's right.
you know? And so my other question then, you talked about fuel prices, and I seem to remember a really long conversation we had about world fuel.
Yes.
And so, do we prepay for fuel?
No.
No, there's no prepay for fuel. Like, you
No.
can't do that kind of thing.
This is really just the
Because that'd
market.
be awesome, because somehow I thought, like, didn't we prepay for
I would be able to kind of hedge and buy
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, although I'd be really nervous to hedge on fuel, even if we had the ability to, you know. But yeah, no, it's just where the market is on fuel. So basically, the way the airlines pay is, they buy it directly from the suppliers at, you know, the market plus whatever.
So
market.
we don't necessarily have anything to do with that.
With the
but-
pricing on for them, really very, the only thing we control is what we charge them to put it in the aircraft, what we're actually charging to pump it,
Right.
you know.
And what has our charge?
Fuel fluid.
Yeah.
It is going up with this year's budget,
Yeah.
but not significantly. I think it was a 10% increase, which may sound like a lot, but honestly, it's pennies on top of pennies, you know?
Okay. So
So-
we're not worried about that.
Just the distribution cost is not
Okay.
the cost of
It's
fuel.
whatever their contract is with World Fuel
Okay.
for their pricing. Each airline has.
The end of plane cost that we charge is not a huge factor in that.
Okay, because you were talking about, you know, if you go up to $1 from 75 cents, people they're going out of their minds. So I'm figuring, are they
I
going
mean-
out of their minds with these fees, and can you throw some CARES Act money at that to help offset it, if it's an issue? If not, like, I'm not gonna worry about it.
Yeah, I think the area that they get most concerned is, the airfield and terminal costs.
Mhm.
We talked about, the 2.8 roughly of CARES money that we're putting into the rate base to reduce the cost to the carriers. Because again, Darren had a great slide that showed around us all of the service reduction and sort of what's happened. I know if you've been reading the news, you'll also see airlines making service decisions and removing service from some of the airports around us. And a lot of that is cost driven. So they're taking a look at what the costs are, and based on the limited resources with crews and aircraft that we saw, they're starting to look at where can we be most profitable with this aircraft and crew right now.
Yeah, because I imagine the crew is the issue too. If you can't get enough people to staff a plane, you can't have a
Pilots,
flight.
flight attendants, there's a shortage everywhere.
Wow.
Mechanics.
And so fuel prices aren't like a huge issue. It's more
They-
about the
they-
terminal fees and.
They
the
are in
landing fees.
general for the airlines, but that's based on a contract negotiation directly with the fuel supplier. So it's nothing that.
That we can do anything about.
Right.
Okay, I just asked. Great. All right, I'm done.
I just want to think about, you said throw CARES money, and we use.
Oh, yeah, how much CARES money do you have left?
We can't throw any CARES money, I mean, we use it for kind
You
of balance our
do.
budget.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, there's no more to throw out there.
Oh, there's no more.
I mean, we talked about that earlier, all the CARES and all the services are already in the 2022 budget.
So do you anticipate getting another round of money next year?
So we have the ARPA grants, American
Yeah.
Rescue Plan Act grants. So those, I think we had approved, in September?
Mhm.
We just saw those come through. I think, Judge, you helped me sign some of those pretty recently this month. So we'll have those funds available, but again, part of this idea is as we said from the beginning, is we know that we're going to be using these funds over a period of a few years as we get ramped back up to speed. Again, without the 3.8 of CARES, we don't have we have a net loss in the budget. So we anticipate needing that support as we move forward the next year or so.
So will you be able to get, or will the airport be able to get any of this infrastructure money that's coming through? And maybe displace some of the money that's been budgeted for projects and slide into that.
Absolutely, that's our hope. And working with Colin, we're taking a look at what sorts of projects are eligible. I know Ryan and we've been talking to the FAA, taking a look at, there's some money in there for terminal construction and terminal reconstruction or rehabilitation. So until we actually see what those programs, how they're spelled out and explained and what types of work is eligible or is not, we won't really know how that might flow out, what the distribution formulas are going to be and eligibility. So
There's too many questions.
lots of questions. We know very 30,000 foot that there's some money programmed, and we think that we have the potential to apply, but until we know the timing and specific eligibility requirements, we won't perfectly know. But it's absolutely something we're going to be continuing to keep our eye on and pursuing if we can.
Very good.
All right, any other questions? We all good?
Do we have any new business to bring up?
No new business.
All right, then can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being with us today. I apologize for getting in with some technological difficulties.
Thanks, Mike.
Meeting is adjourned.
So do we want to take maybe a 5-minute bio or a 10-minute bio break or do you want to just plug ahead for executive?
So what's
Matt shot me a note and wants me to go ahead and
you're
conduct it.
gonna run exec committee for us,
Yeah.
Brian? I mean, do we have a quorum so that?
We do.
Sir.
Okay, then I would say if we're in good shape, I'd keep rolling.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and call the executive committee meeting to order. We do have a quorum, and I understand we do have public comment?
We do, sir.
Okay.
So on November 9th, we received a submission from a Mr. Joseph Michael Vasevich. And he expressed kudos to the ABE Delta staff for their efforts of going above and beyond. My flight from ABE to Detroit on Sunday, November 7th was extraordinary. The Delta staff at ABE went way above their duties and really made my day. The entire team there deserves a special commendation for their exemplary customer service. Then he goes on to explain what his experience was in great details, mostly about a passport that he left behind, and also that the passport had his COVID card in there. And then he was able to retrieve it. So I will add this into notice so you can see it's a full story on his whole experience. So anyways, he ends here with, so I send my grateful thanks to all those Delta people and others at ABE Airport who perhaps with the hidden grace of St. Anthony got my passport back to me. Maybe this little story of a lovely success makes up for at least a few of the complaints you all hear at this stressful time. Please share my praise for their efforts. I am truly grateful. Sincerely, Joseph. So that's it.
Okay, it's always nice to receive one of those, and I think that the credit obviously goes to the staff and going out of their way to make a person's life a little easier. So thank you for that, Sylvette. Okay, the meeting minutes were distributed via Novus and via email, and I'll accept a motion to.
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Motion to approve those minutes.
Great, I'll make a motion.
Second.
Second.
And do we have any additions, discussion items on that? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, they're approved. We have the Florio Perucci invoices was also distributed. I'll take a motion to approve that invoice.
I'll make a motion.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Michael. Any input on that invoice or any discussion? Then all in favor of approving the Florio Perucci invoice, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So discussion items, Glenn, you're up.
Yes. So it's always exciting when the IT guy gets up in front of the board, so we'll do our best not to
We'll go through
drown
questions.
anybody in a lot of acronyms that nobody understands, so thank you. So for today, what we want to do is provide an overview of exactly what the IT department does here at the LNAA. We want to really try to provide some insight into some of the key projects and initiatives we've worked on over the past couple of years, what we're currently working on, and some of the things that we're looking at for the future. So without further ado, what I'd like to do first is introduce you to some of our team. Obviously, most of you have met me. I'm the Director of Information Systems and Technology, but here's some of the people that work behind the scenes that you might not have had the chance to meet yet. So looking from left to right, we have John Hill. John's our IT manager. He's been with us with the organization for 20 years. So one of the things you're going to see here is we have members of the team that have been here for quite some time. So John is in charge of running the day-to-day daily operations of the department, handling a lot of the work orders and, managing those queues and the activities of our two IT technicians. So he's a real key piece to our organization, making sure that, ongoing projects are being run efficiently and that we're coordinating properly with all of our vendors. So John's, really at the helm of the department. So next, over to the right of John is Phil Hodson. We kind of touched on the idea of, moving up throughout the organization. Phil started 17 years ago, and he actually started in the ground handling operations here. So he was loading airlines. So he kind of pivoted throughout his career, moved into, I believe back in the day where we had we were running some of our airline operations pre-Allegiant and everything. He was working on bookings and doing some automations and really kind of grew in that role. So he's a fantastic asset. So he does all of our applications development. I've been in the business of IT for over 20 years. This is the first experience where I've had an in-house resident programmer, and it is such a fantastic asset to have on hand. Next to Phil, we have Colton Miller. He is our senior IT technician. He's been with us for 5 years. Colton's really doing a lot of the day-to-day out supporting the end users as far as desktop support, application support, network administration. So really doing that frontline work that's really vital to our success. He joined us from a service provider that he was working for as a contractor basis, and we liked him so much we brought him over to our staff. So, and then last but not least, we have Skylar McCain. He is our newest technician, and he's been here for roughly about 6 months now. He joined us in May. Prior to working for the airport authority, he was working for Wayne Bank, a well-known bank up in Pike and Wayne County. He's really, at this point, just learning the ropes, kind of shadowing Colton, and just getting familiarized with a lot of the systems and technology here at the airport authority. So what do we do? It's a long list of things. This really is not by any means all-encompassing of everything we do, but it's the large majority of what we handle on a day-to-day basis. So the obvious ones are, desktop, laptop support, our networking and wireless communications, cable and fiber infrastructure, our airside systems. So we kind of always talk about airside and land side. So we have fuel monitoring, airfield lighting, ring down. So if ring down sounds like a strange term, all that really means is we have dedicated phone lines that we use in an emergency, that you pick up a phone in the operations center and it rings directly to the tower. So that's a vital piece of information that we use in the event of an emergency. Then we move over to our landside systems. We've got the paging system. You hear calling every time you walk in the door, probably every 5 to 10 minutes with the overhead paging system. MU FIDS, that stands for Multi-User Flight Information Display System. So is your flight screens that you see throughout the terminal and the departure building. Common use CUTE. So CUTE stands for Common Use Terminal Equipment. That's the equipment that we have over at the gates that allow any airline to operate any flight operation at any gate. So it doesn't matter, if they're working at gate 2 or gate 9 or gate 10, they can walk to any gate, log into their systems, and the next flight could be a completely different airline. So very important piece of technology that we operate here. Obviously, our two-way radios, and then lastly, we're talking about the park system that Ryan was talking about earlier.
Hold on 1 second. Hold on.
Our parking system. So, business and finance, we have email, intranet, document management, cell and land telephony. And then we have our safety and security, which is CCTV, access control, emergency phones, badging. FCR stands for field condition reports. That's where our operations officers are out on the airfield making notes of conditions out on the runways, taxiways, and airport aprons. And then last but not least, we have our maintenance and facilities, CMMS, which is computerized maintenance management system, and building automation. So that was a mouthful. So this is just kind of a capture of a lot of the technology partners that we work with. Some of them are local, some of them are, larger corporations, obviously. So some of the local ones we work with, RCN, Service Electric, ET&T, Integra One is up there as well, Vistacom. So a lot of great partners that we have right here in the Valley that we like to work with. Some quick stats, looking from left to right. On the left-hand side, you see some of our numbers as far as closed work orders by year, going back to 2017. So 2017, we're a little bit over 800 work orders for the year. We had a bit of a dip down in 2018. We saw an increase with obviously the increased activity back in 2019. And then to no surprise, we saw a small drop in activity in 2020, but not as much as a drop as you would expect, because 2020, although we might not have had all the passengers, we had a lot of challenges in mobilizing our workforce and really providing a means to keep things running while we're trying to take care of our employees in the midst of a pandemic. So, and then as you can see, 2021, we really jumped back up, and we haven't even finished the year. We've already eclipsed what we did in 2017. So we're looking at probably roughly in the neighborhood of 900 or so closed work orders this year by the time the year is finished. Right-hand side, just giving you some metrics of all of the amount of technology we're taking care of, from desktops, laptops, all of our monitors, servers, network infrastructure, card access, the amount of cameras. Interesting metric that I noted was the amount of fiber optic that we have, over 100 plus miles just here at ABE, and then all of our software applications. So some of the key projects and initiatives we've worked on for the last 5 years, I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but you kind of get an understanding of some of the milestones that we've hit. Back in 2016, we replaced all of our camera infrastructure, or the back end for the camera system. Major project that we worked with HR and the finance department was the payroll system migration to Paycom. And one thing that doesn't seem like a major project, but really was kind of a milestone for us here, is laptop deployments for directors and senior staff. Really, prior to that time, laptops and remote access was really not that common of a thing here. And as we all know, with what happened in 2020, that became vital to keeping the organization running. So we had some significant investment in software development in 2017 with the Airport IQ application. So Airport IQ is a suite of applications we are using for both our tenant airline billings as well as some of our safety and operations systems. We did a major common use upgrade. We just talked about that just earlier. So that was a major project in 2017. And then Novus Agenda that you've all been familiarized with your time on the board. 2018, we looked at document management system, Laserfiche. So that was the first time we really started to digitize a lot of our paper processes and streamline things. One of the big parts for that was we did a lot of work on our invoice approvals, and we took that process that could be a process that in some cases took weeks and really narrowed that down to a process of days. So instead of paper floating its way around inboxes upstairs and waiting for it to pass across all the desks, it all started to flow electronically, really streamlining and making that more efficient. So we've talked about a lot of things that are really taking place at ABE, but we wanted to also highlight the fact that, yes, we're also doing things like camera installations at hangars 7, 8, and 10 at ABE, but also at Queen City and Braden Airport. IT handles all of these infrastructures and technology pieces at all 3 locations. So, and then one of the other things we did was in 2018 was our first organization-wide network security assessment by a third-party vendor. Very, very important thing in this day and time because of, you know, the constant evolving threat landscapes for cybersecurity. So, and we talked about some of these other items down at the bottom, but last but not least, you know, I definitely want to point out the virtualization hardware upgrade completed with CARES Act block grant assistance from both Lehigh and Northampton counties. So definitely appreciate their involvement with us and their, you know, their generous donation of the grant funds to make those things possible. So interesting. So some of the images are not popping up. So yeah, can you?
Oh, they're just slow.
There you go. So one of the projects we worked on for this year was obviously the parking system. We worked with Richard and Best, and what we had to do out in the parking lot was really provide networking and connectivity to all of these different devices. You see some of the chargers, the cameras. So we had to build out a network out in the parking lot. We provided, you know, new equipment that was modernized. Now you have the ability to pay at any of these pay-on-foot loop machines with either credit card, cash, or mobile payment, something we never really had in the past. You can also make those mobile payments right at the exit lanes as well. So really kind of stepping up our technology out in the parking lot. And then also wanted to point out that we worked with ChargePoint, who was our vendor for the electric vehicle charging stations out in the short-term lot as well. So very great project to work on, and fantastic that we got to be a part of that. So excited to get that done. So another item that wanted to highlight for 2021 was our Earth Networks sirens and strobe lightning warning system. So working with the Earth Networks vendor, we implemented a series of sirens and strobes out at the airfield location. And you can kind of, you can let it play. You can hear it. It does have a little bit of volume to it, but what happens is anytime that there is a lightning strike within a 5-mile radius of ABE, it automatically triggers those sirens and horns. alerts everybody that there is a risk of a lightning strike. So while that's happening, we have a alert crackdown that is available to all of the staff and stakeholders so they can see the status. So we typically have a 15-minute wait period until we do the all clear. This is really an expansion of the project we did earlier with them, where we were sending out the alerts via text. So now we have expanded coverage out on the airfield. So very happy to get that project completed as well. So last project I'm going to highlight for 2021 is our extra help Reveal X network detection and response. As everybody knows, one of the things that is a very, very at the forefront of everybody in technology is cybersecurity. It doesn't seem like you can go a single day without another story about some sort of cyber breach. We're very mindful of that here. We have a lot of passengers, we have a lot of different airline partners, and security is really at the front of our minds. So we made this investment this year for a system that really tracks a lot of the network traffic, and we're really able to see in fine detail what's happening on our network in real time. We get alerts. Just on Saturday, I'm getting an alert because it looks at behaviors and it sees when something doesn't look right or sees something that's out of the normal. And Todd had actually come in on his Saturday to work diligently on his finance presentation for the board, and it actually emailed me to tell me that Todd's signing in at a strange time on a Saturday afternoon. So, and that's not the only example. There's been a couple. I even had one with Tom a week or two ago. So it's definitely letting us know a lot of things that we might not have seen in the past. So it's a great utility. I was very excited to get this on board, and it's fantastic, and it's going to allow us to really help protect the organization as a whole. So some of the other items that are currently in progress, we're working on a automatic license plate recognition system. So where we're going to do that is at the front entrance. As you come in, there are going to be a set of cameras that are going to actually sit and look at the vehicle's license plates, and it'll track them. So there's two reasons why we're doing that. Number one of the cameras is going to be pointing in the parking lot direction. So as the vehicle goes into the parking lot, we're able to see when it entered. We have a lot of passengers that do have a tendency to lose their tickets. So when they come up to the parking booth, we have to take their word for it as far as when they came in, or, in some cases, they're able to provide us their itinerary so we can kind of prove it that way. But this is a much more concrete, solid way of us to really solidly identify when they entered the lot so we can charge them appropriately. The other is obviously safety. So if there's a vehicle that has been identified by authorities as a potential suspicious activity or involved in something that might be of concern, we can be alerted that particular vehicle is on location and we can take appropriate measures. So that's one project we're currently working on. The access control system, our badging system that we use here across campus, that has been in place for about 20 years. So very much needed upgrade to that system is in progress. Verizon DMARC. A DMARC is essentially a part of a building where all of your utilities from Verizon or telecommunication companies all come in and then feed out to the relevant offices and rooms and other locations. That's going to be relocated out of the old government building and into the main terminal, just providing better facilities here and in the meantime, as well as simultaneously upgrading the capacity that Verizon provides to all of our stakeholders. And then last but not least, down at the bottom, you see kind of an example. We have the Viovo passenger predicted wait time. So it's going to provide a real-time information to our passengers as far as what the expected wait times are going to be at the TSA security checkpoint. And we'll be able to publish that both to screens on site as well as to our website, really giving you a better idea of what to expect when you get to the airport. So really excited to get those items done. So for those first 3 items on this slide, we're anticipating probably completion early first quarter of 2022, and then the VOGA passenger wait times is looking like probably around the end of the first quarter. So coming soon. So we're very excited to get those all off the checked off and in production. So what's next? Well, obviously we've been talking a lot recently about the terminal connector and security checkpoint, and it goes without saying that because we're building more space, we're going to have to add the same kinds of infrastructure that we currently have everywhere else. Networking, wireless, FIDS, paging, access control, all of it. That will all go into parts of this new construction, so very important part of that. Fiber optic improvements. Brian had kind of mentioned that as part of work, coordinating this with the runway improvements. So we have fiber optic, over 100 miles of it throughout the entire ABE campus, and a lot of it's been in place for probably 2 decades, if not longer. So we're running into, with modern technology, some bandwidth constraints and things that just need to be taken care of. So we'll be working with our vendors to replace a lot of that fiber infrastructure, provide a lot more bandwidth for a lot more capacity for more cameras, more network devices, and sensors and everything else that would need that capacity. We're expanding additional CCTV coverage and replacing old cameras that have been in production for more than 7 to 8 years. We're looking at additional camera analytics. I've already talked about it with the LPR, but other things to identify crucial situations such as traffic congestion in front of the terminal, wrong way detection for those that haven't ever seen it. Unfortunately, sometimes we see individuals driving the wrong way around that loop. It's a very dangerous situation. We want to be able to identify that. And then things that are really more of a safety, personal safety thing, fall detection. We can actually leverage our camera infrastructure when people have a slip and fall, so we can, identify that and probably respond before somebody even makes the phone call to our emergency responders. So something we're looking forward to. We're looking at wireless network design, really trying to improve the passenger experience for those that are using our guest wireless services here in the main terminal and the departure building, and also obviously for our employees as well. Application modernization. So this is right in Phil's wheelhouse. This is what he's working on currently. He's going to continue to work on this. A lot of our applications, we talked about the field condition reports. Phil is doing all of the FIDS screens. All of these things are working on very old technologies that he's in the process of upgrading, and we will continue to work on to modernize those applications to just make it a better user experience and improve speed and performance. And then finally, obviously we're going to continue to research into the new developing technologies and try to find ways we can use these things to leverage a better overall experience for our passengers, for our customers, for our staff, and really try to innovate as much as we possibly can. With that being said, I know that was a lot. I certainly would entertain any questions that anybody has.
So Glenn, I think I can speak for the executive committee that we really appreciate you and your team and for this presentation on what you work on. You know that all this goes on in the background, but the work never stops. And even when you do get a project done, then you got to update the next project. So we thank you and your team for everything that you've done. Let me just ask one question, then we can see if anyone else has any. And this is a question for you and maybe for Steve. The power goes out here in the area. What's what backups do you have that you can operate everything that you need to operate as far as safety and lighting and communications and everything like that? I know this is in place, but I'm just curious.
So fortunately, we have a couple of different levels of redundancy. So number one, we have the switchgear. So you have two main power feeds that come in and serve the main terminal departure building. So
Which
you
in
have-
and of itself is extremely unique. PPL double feeds this terminal complex. That's something decision they made many years ago, but we're fortunate to have that.
Oh,
Bethlehem feed from the north side and from the west side of Catasauqua feed separate into that 12,000 volt switchgear. So we have dual feeds, and many times one is out and the other isn't. So that's been
That's kind of amazing.
a real
So
blessing.
you don't even need a backup generator or anything like that?
Generally, we have very few backup generators, but we do have backup generators.
Yeah, we have backup generators. We also, in addition to the backup generators, we have, in different areas, we have battery backup. So we have whole room battery backup. So we have a stack of batteries that basically charge everything, keep everything running. So and that's important to sort of provide the lead time between switching from the primary power source to the secondary power source, because there's a momentary lapse between the time the switchgear does switch over between the power sources. So yes, the answer is we have plenty of redundancy built in there.
A lot of
So-
uninterruptible power supplies, battery backups, other things on the critical equipment to keep it running regardless of what the power is doing. Our airfield electrical vault generator backup, that has to be on to keep the airfield lighting and all of that equipment running regardless of what the standard power is doing. So, and then obviously building system generators around the campus, different generators to keep us able to open hangar doors and other things that we need to do if we don't have power.
Yeah, and parking gates and communications. and
Absolutely.
really all of that.
All
You
the
know,
card
if you lose
access.
power in your home for a day, you can get by, but not out here.
Different here.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially, if you have electric toilets that flush, right?
Yeah, I mean, even like out at the gates, we typically have in each computer, because obviously we want to stay functional during one of those transitions between the power. We've got battery backups for each and every individual gate station. So in the event that we do have a power issue, airlines can continue functioning. There's no disruption there. So.
Any other committee members have questions for Glenn?
So the little solar panels with the solar sun on, are you able to use those because you're only having one panel, or like, what's the FAA status on solar at airports?
Actually, they released the document, was it 2 years ago now? I'm not even sure when they published this final document. But it does talk about solar and sort of the process of going to look at a solar array or solar farms around airports. So it's something we've been looking at internally to, have some sort of document that we can publish and get some bids and
Oh, that would be super awesome.
and take a look at some opportunity for that. And, that's one of the things we wanted to do is work through our master plan, really sort of understand the long-term land plan around the airport and what areas could we take a look at for development of solar.
Right, because with this infrastructure bill that's going in, a lot of that's going to be a big push.
Sure.
Because I saw that one of your partners is Johnson Controls.
Yep.
So they just did an energy audit for the county. Has the airport ever had an energy audit? There's a lot of different places that could do energy audits, but if you have a relationship with a partner
We have.
with Johnson Controls, is that what the partnership is, or?
Actually, no. So the energy audit we had an ESCO company in here, gosh. Steve, how many years ago was this now? I'm stretching my 7?
7 years?
Yeah, so so we had a company in, Constellation Energy at the time,
Oh, yeah.
who did, full investment grade energy audit, went through the whole process, developed a set of projects for us, and we're still working through that. Yep, with our guaranteed energy savings
You're
program.
still working through it, and what was
Well,
the
the projects are
percentage?
done, but it's
Yeah,
the
but
payback over the,
the payback is like a long time. So what was your energy savings per year?
gosh. That number I don't have, but I can get it to you.
Because I was really disappointed with the amount of savings that they, like, it's like 5.6% a year. I was like,
Okay.
that's nothing. That's like,
Well, and I think
that
one of
should
the
be
big
better.
things for us is at the time, it was an opportunity to replace the main terminal chiller. Here in this, it's major HVAC equipment in this building.
Yeah.
That was original to the building. So just upgrading that, a lot of LED lighting, a lot of things that, if you think about timing of when we were doing the project, which was probably 20, I'm going to say that was wrapping up in what, 2013, 14, 15? So that was, things were a little tight in terms of being able to invest back then into the infrastructure. So having a project that could reach some of these critical infrastructure items that we didn't have the resource to reach was really, really critical for us. And the energy savings was also a great thing as we look forward. But we'll take a look. I don't have all the metrics offhand anymore, but we can send that to you.
Yeah, so I was wondering, I just have a comment then. That was really nice that you don't just charge people the day rate to park if they lose their ticket, like you take their word for it. That's kind of amazing, I just want
Well,
to say.
again, if they have their itinerary, you can usually have a pretty good gauge. If they have their airline itinerary, you know when they came in roughly, and obviously when they returned. But beyond that, it does get difficult to understand that. But that's why I think some of the technology will be helpful, just to make sure, because again, there's opportunities for people to come here and not fly. Maybe they, park.
They don't do that in Philadelphia.
I'm sure. Well, we'll get you on camera with that.
Thank you, Glenn.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks, Glenn. Go.
Thank you. All right, next item is the hotel development update. Darren.
Thank you. So some of you who've been here a little bit remember back in 2019, we started looking at some hotel development off of Airport Road. We were actually kind of moving along pretty quick with that, and then the pandemic sort of put that to a halt. So we've been back working on it since then, talking to different folks, looking for partners. From the beginning, we've been working with JLL. They were working with us way back then as well. They've now put together kind of a innovative approach to getting this done, something that we feel pretty good about. So I know this slide has a lot of lines and boxes, but I'll just sort of quickly walk through what this means. So ultimately what the proposal is at this point in time is, so JLL over there will be our developer on this project. They'll handle all these types of things, so design and engineering, construction, and then hiring a hotel management company. Ultimately, the owner of this will be a nonprofit organization, Provident Resources Group. They are a registered 501c3. Their mission, in this case, is to lessen the burdens of state and local governments in doing development projects. So that's how they do this. They've done this other places. So they ultimately will own this. They would do the ground lease with us, with the LNAA. They would do the development agreement between us, Provident, and JLL. So JLL gets development fees, we get the ground lease fees. We also potentially some other fees on top of that, whether, airport usage fees, things like that, that we can add to that. We do have the same, again, for those who remember when we were looking at this back with the previous developer we were working with, we had an option to call this at a period of time. We will have that same call option, so probably around the 10-year mark, we would have the ability to purchase this hotel back, whether that means paying back the bonds that were issued or even potentially assuming the bonds, depending on how we would do that. That's very important, for us. I think it's important, B, very important on the FAA side because it shows that we maintain that control of our property. So the ultimate operation of the hotel, like I said, we would hire a hotel management company, but then basically the governance of it would be with these two committees that I have up here on the top. So we'd have an advisory committee that we would hold a majority of the seats on. That would be sort of the day-to-day, operations, budget, things like that. Making those recommendations to the management committee, which we would hold a seat on that one. They would ultimately make those final decisions on how the hotel operates, like I said, the annual budgets, all of those types of things. So somewhat complicated, but honestly, way less complicated when you have a picture like this with all the things. When I first heard it, my head spun for about 2 days trying to figure out what they meant and how a nonprofit could own this asset. But
Yeah.
basically, they're taking advantage of some things in the tax code that allow this, and it works really well. They just did one, JLL did one with the Provident Group. In this case, Stiefel is the bond underwriter. They used a different bond underwriter. The last one they did with University, actually, in North Carolina, I believe it was. Again, they've done different projects, but they've done a couple of these hotels now as well. So Todd had a chance to sit in on the presentation. I think from the financial side was pretty happy with the way it could work. Our aviation council took a look at it because, again, this is something that isn't typically done at airports. He was very pleased with it and thought FAA would be incredibly pleased with this as a means to do it. So with all that being said, we're basically going to move forward with a non-binding MOU between us and JLL to allow them. So they've done, well, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Basically, the project would be a 150-room upscale hotel, I think Courtyard by Marriott or something in that class. It's about a $30 million project. The actual lease term would be 50 years. However, the lease actually will terminate when that initial round of bonds is repaid. So if that doesn't take the full 50 years, when that initial round of bonds is repaid, ground lease terminates, we become the hotel owner at that point in time.
Do we have to become the hotel owner at the time, or do we have an option?
No, at that point, we would become, it becomes ours. We don't pay for it, it's ours. So it just reverts to us at the end of the ground lease. So yes, we would hire someone to manage it. We would not run this hotel.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully, the management company that's in place would be doing a good job, but we would just turnkey, take it over and let them continue to operate as they've been. But
The portion that I don't understand is the not-for-profit. Like, where do the profits from this hotel go?
they all stay. So when it comes back to us, it continues to populate reserves for a while. There's different reserve buckets. There could be a point where some of that cash comes back to us as the landowner, but at the end of the day, when the hotel transfers ownership, all those cash reserves transfer with it. So the cash stays with the hotel the entire time.
And it just sits there, waiting.
I mean, obviously, a chunk of it goes to bring back the bonds. I mean, that's going to be the biggest thing in the beginning. Like I just said, it is a $30 million.
Yeah.
What you're doing is you're segregating the assets of the actual hotel, so they're kind of segregated, and they are actually what's securing the bonds.
Oh, like one is leveraged against the other.
Right, so if for some reason, because one of the most important things when we talked about this was that it was a non-recourse loan.
Mhm.
That means that if somehow it's default, the only assets that are really in play would be the assets associated with the hotel. That's why you have that bundle there. So that's kind of what's securing the whole thing. It's separate from us, so we're not doing the financing. It's kind of like over here that we kind of have something to do with the management, but it's probably just a little footnote on our financials, but it's really not a financial obligation of the authority other than whatever we've had vested in the hotel.
Eventually, does it get to be profitable?
Oh, yeah, when it comes back to us, the
Then it's-
nonprofit is gone at that point in time.
Oh,
We're taking
okay.
cash out of it. Again, if there are excess on top of those reserves, there is potential that we can take some cash out of it prior to that reversion. But that will all come out in the ground lease and the development agreement that.
But that's
We'll
separate
have
from
to
our
do
ground lease. Ground lease is money in the bank. This is just separate,
Yeah.
to kind of get the hotel going.
And again, important, we do have that call option at 10 years, and we're looking at the projections that JLF has shown us. 10 years, we should have a cash flow producing hotel that we're going to want to call at that point in time. We should, performing on its own, financing and all those types of things shouldn't be a problem for us. So, the goal would be that in 10 years, we take over the ownership of this and then it starts to really produce real cash flow for us.
Oh,
So-
yeah, that was my question, sorry.
That's okay.
So because this is a not-for-profit, are they not necessarily subject to hotel tax?
No, hotel tax will still apply.
Oh,
Hotel tax, real estate tax will still apply.
okay.
Um,
But the entity itself doesn't pay taxes. That's really the whole
So basically, what we're looking at now is an exclusive option to JLL for 60 days to have an independent hotel feasibility study completed. They've done the study, but the bond underwriter is saying, okay, you're the developer. I like your study, but I need someone else to do one. We need to see that, validate it. So
Yeah.
that should take about 60 days. As long as that comes back satisfactory, and no reason to believe it wouldn't, then they will get an additional 5 months to continue working on due diligence. Throughout that time, we'll put together the ground lease and the development agreement, and ultimately be back in front of the board for approval on that, and if all goes well, putting shovels on the ground in not too distant future. So happy to answer any questions on it. That's the first time you guys have seen this one, so
The total acreage that we're looking at for this,
not sure exactly yet, Brian, until we get through the planning. So I think the hotel footprint itself is a couple of acres, but with parking and everything. But I think part of that, we're working on some planning for that terminal area, so that whole airport road corridor. So some of that will probably take advantage of existing parking and things too. So as we get through that and get through the hotel design, we'll have a better idea of that before we come back with the ground lease and everything.
Aaron, in the management company choice and ongoing evaluation, are there going to be a set of performance standards that's going to be set by that management committee, or is that going to be set by the advisory board? How is that all going to work?
So I think it's a combination, Mike, and I think, again, we'll probably work some of these details out more as we go through the ground lease and the development agreement. But there will be some standards in the ground lease itself, since we ultimately will own this hotel, there will be standards, there's definitely some performance standards in there. And then I do believe the actual oversight of the management company will be that management committee that we have. So the advisory committee is working with that management committee.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
okay, any other discussion on this? Thank you. Okay, any new business?
Nothing that I'm aware of.
Judge, any need for an executive session?
Not today, thank you.
If we're not, can I ask a question about the taxi cab issue?
Taxi cab issue, yeah.
Is that resolved now?
I didn't hear what you, I
The
didn't hear.
The
taxi.
taxi cab issue.
Yeah, we got the letters from the judge, so we're going to do that.
Yeah, that was to prepare notice to the taxi company that was violating the rules by taking passengers away from this facility. Unauthorized cabs can bring people here,
Right.
But they can't.
but they can't then wait and get somebody else to take their cab out of this area.
They have to
So
have to
this
get
was a
permit from
notice
us
to-
to do that.
Oh,
You can drop somebody off, but in
Okay.
order to pick up, you need a permit.
and so,
They were doing it illegally, so we had.
No, it's a notice to them. When we see them do it illegally, we give them a warning. And that's what that notice was about.
so I guess one of my questions then is, are like, if somebody calls a taxi, a Lyft or an Uber or something like that, can they get picked up from the
Lyft and
airport?
Uber is separate from taxi.
So, but I mean, just like, is there anything there that someone could call and get them to come here and pick them up and take them away?
They're not licensed, they cannot pick them up here.
Are Lyft and Uber licensed here?
That's TNC.
Yes.
They are licensed.
Yeah, we have agreements with Lyft.
This was a separate company.
Right, I'm just asking.
This was a separate taxi company, right?
All right, just asking, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe that's everything then, right?
Yep.
Tom, do you have anything to add?
Nothing else to add today?
Okay. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay,
Awesome, thank you.
all right.
All right. So I'm not sure who's, we have
Justin, he's ready to go.
Justin James. So I guess we don't have a forum then for ad hoc?
We do not. We have Justin and we do have Jen here.
Okay.
We do not have a quorum though.
So we have a few action items on there. I'm not sure. We can hold those for board. I know some of those are things we were trying to get accomplished on the RACP grant, Ryan. So I guess at this point, it's really something that we can make a recommendation if, James, you want to run through the ad hoc meeting for us, and we can make recommendations. We can't, obviously, Judge, we can't approve.
Can't
these
take
items.
action,
Just for,
but you can make recommendations.
Yeah.
so, Tom, if we can reach out, if someone can just join briefly for just for the approval of these items.
Sure.
Yeah, just ask Matt and John to see if either of those can call in. So
Okay.
I'm just waiting for a response, but. All right.
Dustin's got the close-up photo there.
So John can give us a few minutes.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So if he can dial in, that would give us a quorum.
Yeah. And then we can get through
Okay.
the first three.
So, sorry to interrupt. Do we know if we're going to be having December meetings this year?
Good question, Mike. At this point, we don't see a need for December meetings. The only potential that we know of is, we're still waiting on certain grant announcements. Depending on timing of those, we may need to hold a special meeting just for approval and acceptance of a grant. But as we have it right now, there's nothing that would indicate we would have our scheduled committee or board meetings.
Okay. Thank you.
Certainly.
There's John.
All right.
There you go. Now you're good.
You there, John?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
So we are at the ad hoc committee. We had a couple of action items. Not sure who wants to jump in and chair. John, James, I don't.
I think Mr. Hayes should do it. I nominate Mr. Hayes.
All right.
Thanks,
You're
Justin.
welcome, Jimmy.
Good choice, Justin.
You're welcome, Jim.
Looks like you've been nominated, John.
Okay, so I'll do the welcome. Do we have any public, or do we have a roll call, Sylvette? Are we good on quorum?
Yes, sir, we do have a quorum with you now, sir, and we do not have public comment.
Okay, sounds good. So we've got 3 action items on the list today. Approval of the meeting minutes. They were circulated via email. I'd entertain a motion to approve. Motion. I see Justin's hand up. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we got a second. Any additions, deletions, corrections, or discussion needed? Hearing none, all those in favor of the subject motion indicate by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, we've got approval of 2 RCAP grant applications. So who is taking us through? Is this Todd, Darren?
Close. It's going to be Ryan.
Okay, Ryan, you're up.
Thanks, John. Yeah, we can go through these pretty quickly, but just as a recap, for the committee. So in January of this year, we accepted I'm trying to think of the right word. Can you scroll up a little bit? It's not the, scroll up, sorry. The authorization, the RACP authorization that we got in January, that we were eligible for the $1 million that we had applied for. So the formal application as required by their process is due December 23rd of this year. As part of that, there's 22 tabs or sections that we work on with our consultant. One of them, because of how the RACP system is set up in terms of who can apply versus be the grantee, we need to actually formally designate LNAA as the grantee. So there are some folks that aren't the host municipality or township that would need basically an agreement between the 2 parties to do that. So really, there's a resolution that we have that will get approved Tuesday and signed that basically designates LNA as the grantee as part of that grant application.
So yeah, just looking for approval on that resolution ultimately to get the authorization.
Okay. Entertain a motion to that effect.
Motion?
motion. Motion, do I have a second? Second. Okay, do we have any discussion? Seems pretty straightforward, and, wouldn't expect much.
Yep.
Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of the subject motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next, Brian, is the, I can't see it on the screen.
So it's the project grant match resolution.
Okay, sounds good. Go forth.
Thank you. So this one's similar to the other one in terms of one of the tabs or sections that are required. So this resolution is signifying that LNA meets and exceeds the 50% matching requirement as part of the grant. If you may recall, when we talked in the committee before, is the way RACB is designed is we were trying to include specific construction elements in just for that $1 million itself. So the reporting got a little bit simpler and it made it easier to track. But given the timing, and we'll talk about it in a minute when we get to our discussion, the timing and the pending RACP award that we're waiting on, working with the consultants and the way we set up the documents, it's easier to include all of the general construction costs as part of it and report it accordingly. So we clearly meet and exceed that 50% requirement. So that resolution is basically stating that, as well as where we have the financing money and which account we put it in as part of that to prove that we have the funds for the matching share. So we're looking for approval for that resolution come Tuesday that we'll submit with the full application later in December.
Okay, sounds good. I would entertain a motion to that effect.
Motion.
Have a second?
Second.
Okay, do we have any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the subject motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, guys, do you need me for anything where I gotta duck back into my bank board meeting?
Those are the action items, John. Thank you very much.
Okay, sounds good. Hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving.
You as well.
Take care, you too.
Yep, take care.
Do you want to table the discussion, or would you like to continue?
I would defer James and Justin, if we can certainly walk through the update.
Are we gonna discuss it at the full board meeting next week?
We typically would not provide the update, the PowerPoint slides there, Justin. It would typically just be in committee, so happy to do that and give you the
Then I'd
kind
like
of
to see
the.
them, please.
Okay, perfect. So Ryan, you want to walk us through the update?
Sure. All right, so a few updates we'll walk through from last month. Again, similar format that you've seen, but again, just highlight some of the differences. So we're day 138 as of today of 7:30. Some of the major work completed, and I'll show some photos as we talk through it, is some of the supportive excavation, which is supporting that about 23-foot deep tunnel opening that they're working on right now. The water main connection is complete, so the new water main in the area is up and running. Stormwater pipe installation has been completed, and the new sanitary connection was done as well with minimal to no impacts to the traveling public. We got that done. In terms of ongoing work items, micropile installation, they're just about halfway with that work. That's going a little slower now, which was planned for in that tunnel area. Again, going down into that pit, as we'll call it. They are also, we've encountered talked about it last month, but about 5 sinkholes at this point. Continuing to mitigate those, obviously important when they're near the micropiles and the foundation to make sure we don't have any issues in the future. And to reiterate, we do have our geological engineer on site, basically coordinating with the contractor the mitigation measures that they should be doing to make sure there's no issues. Again, we're working on the structural components, and up until the end of the month, we're still working the 10-hour days, 6 days a week to take advantage of the weather. So utility work within the tunnel still being done at night, and we'll get into a little bit later some of the demolition and the noisier work at night. And then week of December 6th, we're looking to install the new switch gear that's going in at the end of the tunnel as part of that as well. So that's kind of a picture of that supportive excavation area that we're talking about. So upcoming work, the biggest thing that's going to be coming up in the next few weeks, and if we don't have meetings in December, should be complete when we meet in January, is we're working on starting the demolition of the existing tunnel wall required as part of that vertical circulation core that expands the tunnel. So the tunnel wall itself is about 23 inches thick, so just shy of 2 feet. So it's going to take about 3 weeks for them to do that. And the span opening is, I want to say, between 20 and 30 feet as well. So working through a pretty big area. And then right out here on the second level, later, likely in January, we'll be putting up some partitions and demolishing that glass wall in order to continue the construction out on the site here as well. So as of yesterday, this is where the site was. You can again see the underground tunnel in the middle. The excavated area, which we'll show in a minute, is over here again, which is where the new vertical circulation core is going to come through here, connect into the tunnel there. As part of the micropiles, they're doing the foundations and pile caps. You can see all the rebar that goes in, and some of the again foundations that are starting to get scattered around the site. So this is in the existing tunnel right at the end. You can see the escalators right behind here. So again, working on these partitions, so it's enclosed obviously when they connect through the tunnel behind it. And then obviously working to continue some of the throughway here as well, but back here is a little hard to see is where that new switchgear is going to be, which again, when it connects, it's part of the end wall, so it won't look as out of place as it does right now during construction. Again, you can see the foundation walls going up as part of the support foundations with the micropiles and the pile caps you can see there. And then actually you can kind of see this is the outer wall that kind of curves around as part of that. So starting to see some shape taking form, which is nice to see. Again, as I mentioned, this is that supportive excavation in the site. This is actually the existing tunnel wall right here, which is where they'll be coming through. And again, you can see the micropile rig in that area, working through what they need to do with their supports. Again, recap we've done before with phase one. The first 3 pieces are done, working on the micropiles foundations, continuing to move forward with that vertical core in that area that we were just talking about. Comparing to last month, you can kind of see where we were and where we are in terms of some of the site work. Utilities, as I mentioned, are 100% done. Vertical circulation core, keeping that moving, and obviously continue to move forward, taking advantage of the weather for as long as we can. Again, no changes here with phase 2 coming later in 2022, and then phase 3 in terms of once the new checkpoint is open, working in the tunnel. But here, again, updating where we are, excuse me, some of the numbers. Again, utility relocation is complete. Working to get the micropile foundations completed in January, keeping that moving. And as I mentioned earlier, Tom kind of alluded to, we're still waiting on that $5 million RACB application that we submitted. So I know working with Colin, we're really waiting to see when we hear on that. Once the announcement's made, I think the way it happened last time was we got a letter maybe 15, 20 days later, and then that started a 30-day clock to accept it. So depending on when we get that, we might have to have a special meeting depending on the time. But all the other grants we have in place, we're actually working with the state to get some of that $3.5 million reimbursed right now, and continuing to work through that. That's the update I had. Happy to answer any questions.
No, thank you.
Great. Okay. We don't have a committee anymore, so I'm not sure we need a motion to adjourn.
Good job, guys.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Thanks, Justin. I don't know if anybody else on the line, just we did. Okay. I think that concludes today, gentlemen. So we'll hopefully see everybody back after Thanksgiving holiday on next Tuesday at noon for our board meeting. So thanks so much for participating today, and have a great holiday.